Former lead quest designer for Starfield claims that a large portion of gamers are fatigued with 30 plus hour long games. Roll this up over at fandompulse.com. You can find the link in the description below. Head on over, become a paid subscriber. It costs less than a Starbucks coffee, just $5 a month, and we are fully reader supported. So we will not be influenced by big money, by the Googles, by the advertisers, etc. We are here to provide you the truth. So Starfield lead quest designer Shen, he left Bethesda back in 2023, recently claimed that a large portion of gamers are fatigued with 30-plus hour-long games. He did an interview on YouTube channel Kiwi Talks, and he said, now we're reaching a point where people are fatigued, or a large section or a growing section of the audience is becoming fatigued at investing 30-plus, 100-plus hours into a game because they already have that. They already have the games that they will continually come back to, and adding another one to that list is a tall order. It's always a tall order, so we're seeing this resurgence of short games. So I think this is an utterly ridiculous argument, and he actually kind of contradicts himself, as we'll see later on. I don't think it has anything to do with the length of the game. I think it has everything to do with the quality of the game and whether or not people are actually enjoying those games. Now, obviously, there are all kinds of different types of gamers. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of any kind of first-person shooters. I like my strategy RPGs. I like my JRPGs. I used to like a lot of Western RPGs, not so much anymore because they're all infected with the woke mind virus. So I definitely enjoy a lot of those larger games where you are investing 30 plus, 100 plus hours. And if you look back, I think some of the most successful games over the past couple of years have been games that have that 30 plus, 100 plus hour time frame. Now, again, I don't think the time has anything to do with it. I think it has much more to do with the quality of the game. You look at something like Persona 5. One of the games that I've really been enjoying this year is Unicorn Overlord. And that is obviously time, has a lot of time into it as well. You can go back and look at Triangle Strategy. Obviously, love myself some Final Fantasy Tactics. Huge fan of Final Fantasy 12. Obviously, all of those are games with a lot of time to play. And then obviously you can look at games like World of Warcraft. Dark Age of Camelot was one of the ones that I really grew up playing. Those games are massive amounts of time sink. You can even look at a lot of the gacha games now. You look at Genshin Impact. You look at things like Honkai Star Rail, Withering Waves, Zenless Zone Zero. People are putting tons of time into those games, and they're actually providing updates on those games on a regular basis. So I don't think people are becoming fatigued at spending 30 plus, 100 plus hours into games. I just think that's utterly ridiculous. And as you see here, he kind of does contradict himself and say like, well, it's really not about the length of the game. But he does point to mouthwashing to kind of bolster his original argument here, saying, I just played mouthwashing. It's only like 3 hours long at most. It's a very short experience, but part of the benefit is that the community engagement around the story of mouthwashing is only possible because everyone who is a fan has actually played through it all the way to the end, and that's important for engagement with the story and the product. So mouthwashing is a huge hit because it's short. There are other factors into that, the execution, nice iconic key art, all that kind of stuff, but that game doesn't succeed nearly as well if it were longer and had a bunch of side quests and miscellaneous content. The shortness is the point, and that level of engagement was so refreshing to see from a developer who's done a lot of big games. It's like, oh, you can have a fan community conversation around a game that's much shorter because the shortness allows everyone to engage fully with the entirety of the product. So I'm not sure if I actually agree with this. Now, obviously, I haven't played mouthwashing, but I would wager that if the quality of the side quests or miscellaneous content, if they happen to put any of that stuff in there, I would assume people would still probably be talking about how good that game is, and not just because it happens to be a short game. They would be talking about it because they like the game. They like the quality of the game. I don't think, again, the length of the game really has anything to do with the fact that you're seeing all of this engagement. Maybe because the game is so good that people continued playing it, because even if the game was 3 hours and it sucked, you're not going to have people finishing it because they're going to get like 5-10 minutes in and be like, nah, this isn't for me, I'm done. So just because it happens to be shorter than a 30-hour game, I think it's really about quality over quantity, right? whether that quantity happens to be shorter game lengths or longer game lengths. He goes on here and says this: most games that are 10 plus hours long, most people don't finish. And I would say 75% of your players only play through the first 5 to 10 hours. So that's a huge fragmenting of your overall fan community base between the people that will play through it all the way to the end and then play it again over and over again. And the vast majority of your audience who will play it for the first 5 hours and then put it down and say, that was pretty good. And then they move on to whatever's next. Now, maybe that's possible. I don't know. I don't have the data on that. I guess we could go and look at some of the Steam trophies. But for the most part, I mean, you kind of do see that I feel like most people are getting through these longer games, at least halfway through a lot of them, over 50% when you look at the trophies and things like that. So I'm not sure if I 100% agree with this stuff. Now, obviously, things come up in your life where you put it down and then you're like, well, I don't even remember where I was in the story. And you kind of feel like, well, I got to refresh myself. So you basically start a whole new playthrough, and then that pattern can repeat. I know that's happened to me a couple of times with some of those games, but the games are still good, right? You're still going back to it because you want to play that game. The gameplay is fun. The story is good. The quality is what matters. So even maybe you don't finish the game, get to the end point because of life or whatever happens, but you can still enjoy the game as it is. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. He then notes this, though. This is what is really interesting. So he talks about, obviously, how people are not liking these long games anymore. But then he points to the fact that Skyrim and Fallout 4 are massively successful. He says, part of what happened was the success of games like Skyrim and Fallout 4, these really big titles that you can play pretty much forever. There's still a lot of people that play Skyrim even after all these years. And the idea of these evergreen games that you could just sink thousands of plus hours into, that hit the industry. So again, he's contradicting his point here that there are people that are done with these long games, where he's saying that you literally have games like Skyrim and Fallout 4 that massive amounts of people are still playing. They're still sinking thousands of plus hours into. So maybe there is a portion that are kind of burnt out, but I don't think it's because they're burnt out on the number of hours in the game. I think it really has more to do with the quality of the game rather than how long you have to spend in the game. Because a game like Skyrim, you can just kind of hop in and play and go and explore the world forever how much you want to. It's not really about like, okay, well, it doesn't feel like you're having to slog it on to like get through the story or anything like that, or you're being lectured to or anything like that. The gameplay is still enjoyable. You can explore, you can craft, you can fight, you can dungeon delve, etc. There's all kinds of things that you can do, and you can do it in brief spurts, in long plays, etc. Really doesn't have anything to do with the length of the game. And then he points to MMOs, right? He says before it was MMOs that were that World of Warcraft, there are World of Warcraft superfans who will never leave that game. And then all of a sudden, games like Skyrim and other open world games really hit their stride with enough content to get past the tipping point of you can almost play it forever. And so that became the big trend that hit the games industry. Again, I mean, you can go back to Pokemon on Game Boy Color, etc. I mean, the replayability of those original Pokemon games is still there. I mean, the gameplay is great. The exploration is great. The progression is fantastic. Those are lengthy games, right? Obviously, you can speed rush them and things like that now. But probably in your first playthrough, you were spending a good amount of time. And then there's obviously all the time that you can spend afterwards. And people had no problems with that. They're still making lengthy Pokemon games to this day. And there's still lots of demand for them. Again, it has nothing really to do with the length of the game. It has everything to do with the quality of the game. And that's why I think his initial argument here about it just being about length is just utterly ridiculous. Then he goes on and says, and you can see Dark Souls and Elden Ring begin a secondary trend of let's make third-person action combat really hard. And so that trend line of all of a sudden every game needed 40-plus hours of content and depth and progression systems and survival crafting because Minecraft became super popular and all of that. See, now, again, he's pointing to the fact that he's pointing to a quality issue here, right? He's saying that, okay, well, everyone saw all of these games that were really successful and they wanted to add in all of this stuff, but they didn't actually realize why those games were successful, what made them do really well. They just saw all of these other mechanics and they wanted to shove them in there to try and capture the success of those other games. And what ends up happening when you do something like that is it becomes a slog. The quality of the game is no longer, it's not good, right? And you're just kind of grinding through stuff to try and get to some objective, and it just isn't fun anymore. Which should be the purpose of most games, is to be fun, right? He then went on to talk about that gamers do have big back catalogs as well as sports games that already offer short experiences. He says, we have so many games now in our libraries that we can return to forever and ever, which again kind of contradicts his point that people are wanting to reject these long games. Well, if they're going back to games that are long, like, it kind of defeats your claim that people are rejecting long games for whatever reason, right? They're going back to play games that are long. And then he points to these games where you can kind of just jump in, right? He says Madden or FIFA, Call of Duty, Fortnite, League of Legends, World of Warcraft, any of those really big behemoths like Skyrim that has happened. And I think it's going to be a long time before those games leave the market. How long will Fortnite go on? It could be another 20, 30 hours. Maybe it's forever. Sports have gone on forever. Football, soccer, basketball. It's been a long time since someone's introduced a new team sport that has huge mainstream cultural influence. So maybe forever, maybe in our lifetimes, 50 years from now, there'll still be Fortnite updates and it'll still be the mammoth success that has always been. And again, people put in tons of time on Fortnite. They're constantly updating Fortnite stuff. Obviously, that's also a game that you can kind of jump in, play a session, jump out whenever you feel like it, right? So there are games like that where you can also like spend lots of time playing at the same time. So again, I don't think it has anything to do with length of the game and how much time you put into it. He then said this, despite claiming a significant portion of gamers are being fatigued by 30-plus hour games, he then hedged and noted that it really depends on the genre. So you can't make this stuff up, right? I think he realized what he was saying wasn't exactly true. And maybe it was just a personal opinion, or maybe he was just thinking about certain games at the top of his mind and wasn't really thinking about it in maybe the broad sense that he was talking about it. So he goes on and says, the games industry as a whole is gigantic. It's more than anyone can comprehend, and it's everywhere across the entire planet. So when we're talking about the games industry, we're usually talking about some segment of the games industry for a particular market of the games industry. Oftentimes, that's the AAA market in North America and Europe. That is where most of the fan discourse happens, but an inordinate amount of the playtime and money is spent, say, in the mobile market in places like Asia or South America or Africa, where that is not something that's in the AAA North America, Europe conversation. So obviously, you have, like I pointed out, you have games like Genshin Impact, Wuthering Waves, Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero, etc., that obviously are updating almost on a monthly basis, providing new updates, and are obviously players are spending lots and lots of time in those games and are totally fine with it. And those are some of the most successful, especially financially successful games out there right now. They are making lots and lots of money every single year with those games. Hoyoverse is. So I don't agree with this idea that there's a large portion of gamers that are fatigued with 30-plus hour-long games or 100-plus hour-long games. I really think it has more to do with the quality of the game. Again, you can point to something like Warhammer, Space Marine 2, obviously, that had a shorter length when it came to the main campaign, but you can do all of the other things outside of that with the co-op and everything like that, where you can indeed end up investing 100-plus hours into the game. And people are doing that because it is a fun game. Whereas you look at other games where people are just like, I'm not touching that. I'm not going to continue playing that. No, thank you. And they stop playing it, or they don't even play it at all. One can look at Concord as an example. One can look at Dragon Age: The Veilguard. One can look at Star Wars Outlaws. People are not going back to those games. They are not playing them in the first place. And the people who did kind of play them, the ones who seemingly did complete it and get through, were the streamers who were criticizing the game and the development team to begin with. But let me know what you guys make of what Will Shen had to say here. Do you agree with me that I think his comments here are a little misguided, and what he's really trying to criticize here is more quality of the game rather than any kind of game length being a determining factor with these things? Let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, and to always, always speak the truth.